Does anyone out there know about antifreeze? Because we pretty much have two. It's ethylene or propylene, two different kinds these days. And is there any test you can buy that you can verify what kind you have in a machine? I know you have different colors, but that does not give you a super clear certain answer. Here I'm doing a little bit of test mixing the two kinds because they warn you about mixing them, and I will leave these and see if anything happens or if they still work. They are not that far apart when it comes to density that you can test. I had just this with a flotation device in it, but I later purchased one of those optical refractometers thingies, and the density is not that far apart. So regarding the antifreeze properties, it shouldn't really matter as long as nothing gets you get clumps or it so. But if anyone knows anything of that, please comment. But from what I can find, nothing exists. The reason for this is that I had some unknown antifreeze in without its original can, so I suspect it's the blue one here, and I suspect it's an ethylene, and the greenish one is the propylene that the forest machines call for. That one can be a little thicker when it's really cold, so it might not be suitable for small engines. So over to the main part of this video. Continued work on the old tractor that's in the garage as a side project. Kept cleaning out the air filter and also the tractor meter unit that we started gluing back up together in the end of the last video. Put the internals back in place. Yeah, took some cleaning because there was quite a build-up of dirt and stuff in the air filter unit. Put a little silicone on the glass for the meter, and then it was put in place, and a couple of small clamps were used to hold it in place as the silicone cured. Was kind of a lint or strings of some kind. I'm not sure really what that was stuck in the filter, but trying to blow out the worst of it. And there is oil in there, so it will catch fine stuff. I don't think it's been maintained properly, but there was some fluid in there at least. But here it's fresh oil and all cleaned up, ready to go back together. And the clamp holds the bottom part with the oil in place, and then it was just a matter of getting it back into its position. It's a little tricky that you need to fit the cover plate here together with the air filter unit itself, and it's kind of tricky to get access to it, the bottom part, to change the oil. It would have been easy would it not have a front loader on the machine. Also realized I hadn't really gotten a good seating here, so I had to take things apart a little to kind of lower things down and get it firmly into the hose that feeds the intake before tightening all the other things up. Started cleaning up the engine that was quite black and dirty. Yeah, and my dad, the pyromaniac, wanted something this evening when it was dark and cloudy to brighten up the day or evening. The front end removed the registration, the plate, license plate, held quite a bit of dirt behind it. Also wanted to get in here and clean up the radiator, and there is a curtain in front of it, and it's supposed to have a chain running all the way to the cab so you can pull it up, but that thing also collects a lot of dirt. still seemed to function actually, but I decided to get rid of it. It has a thermostat in the cooling system, so this will help it get a little hotter a little faster. But it also has the electric heater and gets that if it's cold outside, so I'm not too worried. So off it goes, cleaning up the fins on the radiators, on the radiator some. Had also purchased a new temperature gauge for it, since that heat transfer wire was broken on this one also. And here it came undone a lot easier, and the old gauge is removed. Trying to feed the new sensor cable into place. This would turn into a big hassle. Yeah, I needed a new spade connector to feed the light. It looked different on the new sensor. And then feeding it in here, and it was kind of I can see why it was broken, because it was kind of hanging out on the side. But I realized there is kind of a loop here on top of the, well, gearbox or the cover for the clutch under the tank, where I guess it should have been originally. Well, some other things are running through that, and feels like it would be a lot more secure and less likely to be damaged by something, but took a lot of effort to get it in there. Finally was able to get the sensor cable through where I liked it. Then it was just a matter of feeding it up to where it's gonna sit. I will secure it with a few zip ties also along the way. Then a new stop wire, because that was jamming and broken in places, and the new one turned out to be way too long, but maybe that was good, because well, it's impossible to not have any low points on this one, because it's kind of tilted down and it has to come up a little somewhere. So, but I ended up doing a loop in there, had to remove the battery for better access, but it wasn't that hard to get that out. Back onto the tractor meter, once glued was dried. It took a long time, but I folded the edge back in as best I could, and that could be mounted back into place. Here we had a piece of string to keep the routing the same, but I didn't like it. It didn't felt like the best one, so I pulled it out and moved it around a few things down there to get a better angle on it, and then it could be pulled up and secured in the back of the meter, and then that one could be secured. I wanted to be able to move that around to get the pin to get into its slot, but now that can be secured. Battery could go back in. Then it was time to tackle the fuel part of the machine. Closed off the fuel valve. Could remove this glass pre-filter. There is a brass mesh. I had purchased a new mesh here, but the fit for the new mesh wasn't very good at all. The hole was way too big and so on, but luckily the old mesh was in very good condition. The glass bottle here, the glass could be really nicely cleaned up. It had kind of a yellow coating on it and quite a bit of debris at the bottom. So reused the old mesh, but fitted a new seal on there, and that could be fitted back into place. Was careful not to damage the brass mesh, and then tighten things up. That was the easy part. Next up, oh yeah, I refitted the intake mushroom to not get any water into the air filter, front grille. The mesh was I might skip the license plate on this one or mount it somewhere inside the cab. Next, the fuel filters. There are two of them, and there is kind of a bottom and then the filter itself, and it's kind of pushed up onto a pin. It was kind of stuck on there, a little tap and then some wiggling, and it came out. The old gaskets were quite hard and broke when trying to get them off, but eventually got all of them off. Had purchased these kind of fancy glass bottoms for the fuel filters. They also have the benefit of a way to drain a little if you suspect you have any water in the fuel, but this machine has been running for many years without any issues. So maybe we've been lucky, it's been parked outside for a lot of time of that. On the other filter I need to remove a pipe to be able to remove the bolt, to change it to that custom bolt when you have the glass bottom on the filters. Was a little tricky getting in there. I replaced the filters, came with new seals, so and this one could get there. Here it will be hard because the coolant hose is in the way, so it will not be possible to open that drain point under the filter itself. Also realized that it's impossible to hook up the coolant hose that feeds the heater, because this glass bottom builds more than the old aluminum one. I removed that joint and was gonna look at maybe putting some elbow there, and I realized this is the reason why no coolant came out when this came undone, because it's been clogged. No coolant has been circulating through that heater for many years, I suspect. Well, at least I got the rest of the coolant out of it and realized I might need to flush that a little more. So hose was held up high. Water seems to go through the heater itself, and I talked to my dad about it, and this one, if used during the winter, is operated without any doors or back windows, so the heater might not do much. And realized that the fan inside the heating element did not work either, so decision was made to simply remove it for now. I will save all of the parts. I don't throw away parts that fit machines that are still in my possession. Tricky to access where the switch for the fan is, and I needed to figure out where they had hooked up the electricity, but it wasn't too hard on a simple machine like this. But some bolts here were spinning and refused to come undone. Took the top off and the filter element could be removed. I hoped it would gain access to removing the bottom part of it, but it was not. So I thought it was an extra nut on there, but it was just put there as a washer. So sprayed them for now and removed some more of the hoses that are involved with the heater. This is a couple of days later, and the screwdriver holding it in place and some penetrating oil, and it came undone. Removed the bracket that held it in place also, and then I dumped a lot of the dirt out and realized two of the nuts had found their way with the dirt, so I had to dig through the trash because they are not even metric bolts. It's some old inch stuff, so would have been, well, they can be replaced, but it was easier to just dig through the trash and find it. I assembled it, and after cleanup and put it in a box with other leftover bits and pieces. Spent some more time flushing the cooling system, and it was a little bit filthy at first. Had gotten hold of a plug for this place, and I gambled that the other end would have also had the same size plug. It did not. Then the fuel filter could be fitted. And here it's in the front near the water pump. It's tricky to see here. It's a 90-degree elbow that was a little hard to get off, but not too bad. And as I said, not the same thread size, so it would have to wait some and buy a new plug, because I had bought two of the same size as the other place. Changed my attention to airing out the fuel system. My dad was pumping the feed pump, hand pumping it, and nothing came out at the first filter, but I could see fuel starting to fill up in the filter above it now with these fancy glass bottoms. And I didn't bother breaking this pipe apart. I just tightened things up and then opened the pipe at the top of the second filter until diesel fuel came out. And then there are two bleed screws on the pump itself, and opened the first one, and once diesel came out, closed it, and then there is one more on the back side. Had gotten hold of a new plug that could be fitted, so the coolant system is sealed by now. Also found a missing nut here holding the generator. The bolt was still in place, and it was actually quite tricky to get the bolt out. And it's also some inch based size, but an M10 could be I could get in there, but I needed to kind of thread it in because things weren't lining up properly and access was tight, so took longer than I would like to admit. Luckily it looks fast in the movie here, or the video, where I have taken away 99.9% of it. Some more cleanup. Getting rid of some of the baked in dirt in the front. Coolant could be filled, and then it was time for a test start. And it started super nicely. This one has been an incredible machine. It's being easy to start. It had issues with batteries at one point, so they have been replaced once in my lifetime at least. Once it was up to a little temperature, I removed the rubber plug. The same tool we had made for the turning over the Valmet, the harvester, the Sisu engines, could be used here because it has some remnants of a hand crank starter in the front of the engine. So. And with the engine warmed up, the valve cover was lifted and the valves could be checked. You can actually check 4 of them at one point, and all but one was a tiny bit loose, so I did a little bit of adjustment. And the first one was really tricky. It took a long time, but you get a little bit of a feel for it after a while, so the others went faster. Missed when we turned the engine over again, but you have to turn it another 360 degrees and it's possible to check the rest of them. And then the valve cover was, the old gasket was removed and the new one was put in place. I missed video of put it back into place, but it's getting closer and closer. Not a whole lot left to do before I would call this done for now, but there will be a part 3.